Hi, everyone. My name is Marcello, and I'm here with Simon. We are founders of a B2B website design and product development agency called Tennis. If you listen to our podcast, we usually cover web and technology, but we had a user recently comment on some of our content. The user was UTJK was their name. We had covered just very slightly covered someone named Olivetti, who inspired a lot of what is now Silicon Valley and the design industry over there. And we sort of like mistakenly uncovered this, and UTJK commented and was like, just unpacked it even further about how Olivetti made computers that NASA used to bring men to the moon in the 50s and 60s. They were exactly what Apple and Silicon Valley is today in terms of like culture, society, design, and it really got us sort of like down a rabbit hole to unpack this a little bit more. So today's really all about Olivetti, which is a family name, but also a brand name. Um, and really could have positioned Italy as its own Silicon Valley if it moved more, if the tech industry had moved more there.
Yeah. I
Um,
actually think like at the time I went deeper into it and we'll get to it, but it did exactly what you're talking about. It positioned Italy like as this innovator at
mm,
that time. And then I think we'll get to it about who it inspired for modern times, but like they almost wrote the playbook for
totally,
this, which is
totally.
crazy. So they set out for this and there's all these like little threads about what got them there, but that DNA is still so present in the modern Silicon Valley and California. And there's a cool interrelationship between the US and Italy at the time.
Totally. When we went through all this, I came out of this thinking like, wow, the impact of Italy on art and design is like historically incredible, but so under appreciated and represented in modern technology. Because really, like they sort of like kicked off a new renaissance of business, culture, and design that we still live with today, and is primarily attached to the US, but really came from Italy. So it's just like an amazing story.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into it. So Milo was his Adriano's dad, and Camillo founded typewriter company. Well, he started with I think he started with just like electrical equipment or
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Basically like he he went to the US for to learn more about electrical engineering
Camillo
and
did.
then yeah, and then
Yeah.
came back to Italy, which was going through some pretty crazy times at that moment. So that was like
Mm,
way back. What was that? Like in the 1800s, like late 1800s. Um,
yeah, yeah. Was
and founded a
well, he was born.
factory.
It's he was born in 1901. Oh, sorry, Adriano, the son, who is sort of like um known for influencing all of the sort of like tech design and whatever, was born in 1901. So yes, Camillo, his father, was probably in the 1800s. So he
Hmm.
was going back and forth between the U.S. and Italy, and started a manufacturing business basically. And
Yeah,
then
and
in yeah,
and that's so that's my first point to jump in. Like what I learned last night was so fascinating because the time he started the factory, I was trying to figure out like what was going on in Italy at the time because he started the factory with 350,000 lire. You're going to have
mhm,
to correct my
leader, yeah,
Italian,
that's right.
Mr. Gortana. um, so 350,000 lire, 20 workers. He founded the company. Today's like then dollars, it was 67,000 USD, which in today's dollars is like 2.4 millions, which is a pretty significant seed round, right?
Yeah.
And like, where is this investment coming from? Well, it just so happens that historically, Italy was actually behind everyone else. They had like a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. So you have UK, Germany, like a lot of different countries just killing the industrial revolution, like just nailing it. And Italy is like behind the times. And there's this huge push, a huge investment in factories and infrastructure and access to cheap electricity, which actually is why they set up their factory in Ivrea.
Ivrea. Ivrea.
Iv-
It's okay. You can just call it
uh,
Ivrea.
yeah. So it was like actual like it was an economic industrial boom revolution on the heels of all these other countries around them. And Camillo looked at uh, the U.S. as this like gold standard for progress, which is why he even went there to
Yeah,
begin with.
interesting. So he founded the company in 1896 as an electrical measurement instruments company. He was an electrical engineer. And then in 1908, it became Italy's first typewriter manufacturer, um, which resulted in the Olivetti M1, which was the first version of the typewriter that they created. Um, so that's kind of how it started. And then in 1925, Camillo then decided to send his son Adriano to the United States to study modern manufacturing and plant management. So basically, he went over to the U.S. to see like, okay, what are these modern companies doing during the Industrial Revolution? How are they like running their factories? Which is incredible because like if you think about the 1900s to be, I mean, I know this is like sort of common now, where people, go to other countries to understand a specific industry or specifically sending their kids to the US to study, to work, etc. Sometimes they go back, sometimes they stay in the US. But I mean, this
Did
has
you
been
say
going on
work
since
or
the
lurk?
work, lurk, work and lurk. But in the 1900s, this is like, it's just, I can't imagine what that must be like. I mean, you're obviously taking a boat and like not communicating with your family for God knows how long.
It's true.
It's
Yeah,
wild.
Titanic was 1912, so it was all boat.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. So basically, he was preparing Adriano to take over the factory, which he took over in 1926 to work as a laborer. So he worked as a laborer for a couple of years, and he became a director in 32, and then he became a president in 1938. So what is that? 12 years after coming back to join as a general laborer. Um, so that's kind of like his original history in the organization. When he finally became president, he started doing something really interesting. And I don't know where I'd like to understand more about where his inspiration came from, because he started to embed creatives within the business. So painters, architects, graphic designers, graphic artists, writers, into the company's operations as co-builders. And he basically started to develop a design philosophy, which influenced everything from like product design to, we'll get into like organizational culture, organizational strategy. Like everything was based on design.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's another good moment to just like take a step back and talk about what was happening in
Hmm.
Italy at the time. Like it's a little bit of political upheaval too, because you had the fascist movement, right? Um, a lot of economic, political unrest was happening during Adrian's time, right?
Adriano,
Adriano,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, but you also have these movements, like these art and design movements in Italy. Like Futurism was a really interesting movement that looked at speed. Like there's a futurist manifesto we had to read back in university, and you could read it today, and it still kind of applies this idea of like moving fast and like the steam engine, electricity, and futurists built this into their visual vernacular. So you've got that coming along, but then you also had um like rationalism, Italian rationalism they call it, and that was like rationalist design as aesthetics, which kind of, bit of a nod to Apple, right? Like
Hmm.
utility, form versus function. Function is form and aesthetic. So you have all of this happening, and then also these artists and things being disenfranchised from the fascist movement. So what he did is he hired a bunch of them because he wanted to include them. He wanted their vision embedded in the company. And I don't know exactly where that came from, but I think that his father like wanted to distinguish Olivetti from other manufacturers. He wanted style and design to be part of its DNA.
Mm.
There's a quote that he wanted a factory. Um, yeah, I pulled it up. So yeah, this was back in 1958. But yeah, a specific taste and trend, the collaboration and joint effort of management of an industry and a group of painters, graphic artists, architects, and industrial designers has become a cultural reality. The Olivetti Company gives and has always given as much relative importance to the choice of color, design for the machine, as to the choice of some technical procedure, a type of steel, or a method of casting. So, like, design and color and aesthetics is so deeply rooted in how the things
Mm.
work and feel that they were even writing about this as their company's, like, almost manifesto. And this was all back in, like, 1932, if I recall.
Yeah, that's right around the time that he was president, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting. So then, what happened next? One of the models was actually that they created, one of the first models of typewriter that they created around this time was entered into the MoMA's permanent, well, it's currently entered into the MoMA's permanent collection, which is
That's
incredible.
crazy. Yeah.
um, so, yeah, so he started kind of like expanding upon his vision of design within an organization. It wasn't started to become more than just product and started to expand into designing the entire human experience basically within the organization people were working in, which is the factory, but then also the town. So it started becoming its own sort of like movement. He really was designing society along with products. So it
Yeah.
was the first sort of like archetype of what is now a Google campus, or what we see in Silicon Valley in terms of how employees are treated, how the campus is created. So he started actually like building, um, changing the village of Ivrea and started building employee housing with really big windows, gardens, vegetable plots, free medical clinics across the region,
Mm-hmm.
nurseries and kindergartens for like very nominal fees, library stocked with books on history, civics, art, politics. He had film festivals, art exhibitions. He had one of Italy's greatest poets and filmmakers was coming into the factory to give lectures to factory workers. Um, Renowned writers at the time started international publishing houses from Ivrea. Um, and at the time, the workers were the highest paid in Italy's entire industry and also the most productive.
Yeah.
So he was like kind of bridging this gap between like organizational culture and productivity, which
Yeah.
is
And
super
so
interesting.
that's the one thing that I went down a deep rabbit hole last night on.
Hmm.
I just couldn't find a relevant thread about to where that idea came from. Like, why does someone who's running a successful business, successful factory, just sit down and he's like, let's build a town and let's inject the design of our business into the town, into the lifestyle and the culture. So the thread that I followed, it's like it's a little bit dark. It's but it is fascinating and it's not uncommon from the narrative in Europe at the time, but uh as you know, like the family was of Jewish heritage, right?
Hmm.
Um and then I think his mother was Walusian, which is like we're getting
Waldensian.
okay, yeah.
It was a her. It was a Wald. I think she was a. No,
So it's
she was a
like
Waldensian pastor. I think.
yeah, which I didn't
I
know
remember.
what that was. It was the first time I'd ever heard that word, but it's like pre-Protestant Reformation Protestants.
Mm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not
Waldensian
religious in the most.
Protestant. Yeah, she was Waldensian
Yeah, but it's like
Protestant.
pre-Reformation Protestant.
Yeah.
So they were kind of like almost the loudest voice. But okay, so you've got this family, both like legally disallowed from participating
Yeah.
in
And
like
marginalized. Yeah.
and marginalized. And this even happens today. But when you have a marginalized community, that community, they basically they build their own like nation state almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, the system's not going to let us in. We've got to do this on our own. They build their own community, their support networks, their industries, like, and they were doing that already. They just to survive, right?
Yeah.
As a marginalized community. So it's actually not a big leap to say, well, that whole idea of having an isolated community separate from the nation that has its
Yeah.
own culture, has its own politics, like has its own design and idea of what it's like to live, right? Like that's not a big leap, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. We just decided like we're gonna create our own little utopia, basically.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
he was the first person to cut down from 6 working days to 5 working days, and one of the first. I think he was the first person to institute a maternity leave. So they actually built, which in the 1930s ish is wild. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Are you going to be the first to instate a 4-day work week for tennis?
let's do it. I'm down.
Yeah.
So on average, an Olivetti worker earned a third more than Fiat workers at the time, which is also just interesting, like to remind yourself that Fiat's been around for that long. So
Yeah.
by the 1950s, 14,000 people had moved from all over Italy to work in tiny Ivrea, because of this like community and lifestyle that he had created, and the fact that it was just helping the business, like with productivity and everything was kind of flourishing. He was very much about investing in humanity, right? Like that businesses should be the result of a business should be to improve the human experience versus just profits.
Hmm.
Um, and then World War II comes around. He was jailed because he was an anti-fascist, obviously.
Yeah.
He
Fled to
escaped to
Switzerland.
Switzerland. Yeah, he escaped to Switzerland, and then he spent his life in exile writing a full political manifesto, which is still relevant today. He returned after the war and founded the Community Movement, which was a federalist center-left political party built on the core idea of local communities, non-nation states, and that the local communities should be organizing democracy, not the state, basically.
There you go. I mean,
Just
there
kind of,
that's the thread that we were just talking about, right? Like
hmm,
these disenfranchised communities, like just forget the nation, become your own nation, become your own community,
totally.
um, be
Yeah, be
way
in
more
charge of your
isolated.
own. Yeah. So he ended up becoming mayor. He was elected as the mayor. He won a seat in the Italian parliament in 1958. And Ivrea itself became a prototype of, you know, his philosophy. What a town like this, a modernist factory and town following his design philosophy would look like. So much so that in 2018, UNESCO declared Ivrea a World Heritage Site, largely because of his vision, how he transformed the city. I'm interested to know like what remnants of this are left in that town now. I'm sure that it's probably still like a pretty interesting place to visit, and I definitely want to visit next time. Italy. Um, yeah, and then he unveiled basically the first personal computer. So he unveiled the Programma 101, which is widely considered the first desktop personal computer. It had a keyboard, a printer, a magnetic card storage, and could run programmable sequences of operations. Um, People literally did not believe it was real when it was first exhibited in New York. They assumed that it was a mainframe hidden somewhere nearby, which is just wild. So he is credited as creating the first desktop personal computer, which then leads into all of the inspiration that happened afterwards. And we kind of like went down a bit of a deep, you know, path into that. And that's a discussion that could go on forever. But basically, it seems to be that Steve Jobs was like very much directly inspired by Olivetti. The entire design and tech industry seems to be have been really inspired by him. Like we talked about that one of the big conferences that Steve Jobs has one of his first talks, which is recorded, was the whole theme of the conference was about Italian design, um, and all of the sort of like key people within the tech industry now of the big companies were there, all inspired by what was going on in Italy, and basically taking that inspiration and creating what is now Apple, Apple campuses, all of that
Yeah.
sort of
Like
culture.
it's it's crazy how deeply embedded Olivetti is in Apple because I came in actually as a skeptic. Like
Yeah.
when we first did that call when you were in Italy, when it was like, let's just talk about Olivetti because they've got cool graphic design and like there's some interesting stuff here. Like I had no idea that the DNA of Apple was like so inspired. So when I came in as a skeptic, I was like, all right, well let's stress test some of this. But there's a pretty interesting timeline here. So 1981, Jobs, he's like 26 at this point, and he attends the conference, the International Design Conference in Aspen, and the theme was the Italian idea, right? And guess who was talking there? Bellini and
Yep.
Sass?
Yeah. So
Sassas.
two of the like
How's the
primary, that's pretty good. Primary designers employed by Olivetti.
yeah. So they get on the stage and Jobs is there. And he revered Italian designers, which they won. Like at that point, they cemented their identity as Italian design. They were always really capable in the arts. Like if you look at Italian art history, incredibly capable, taste driven, right? Lost their footing in the Industrial Revolution, regained it with Fiat, Olivetti, and like I think another auto manufacturer. And then now look at this. Like they've got a conference with Americans now coming to Europe to learn about what good design is. And so Jobs revered.
That conference was in the US. It was in
Oh, okay.
Colorado. It was in Colorado. So like it was really indicative of like what that sector of American economics was thinking, right? Like they invited the
Yeah,
Italian
true, true.
designers there. They invited all these like startup founders and people that were sort of like positioned to be launching these products that were also connected to what was happening with the Olivetti first programmable desktop, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just so. I mean, and Jobs also the timeline I think was before the conference. He was actually trying to get Bellini as a designer for Apple. So all of it is just so intricately connected.
Yeah, I think the Bellini thing might have been after, because
Maybe,
remember he
yeah,
was ousted from Apple.
might be wrong there. Yeah,
Um, but yeah,
yeah.
so the conference in '81, Jobs is fixated on Italian design. He's fixated on design in general, right? Like he has the inspiration for what design should be. And he wants Apple to be the best in the world. That's like 1982. So then he's keynoting the next Aspen conference and he wants to start injecting like liberal arts into computers, which he eventually does with the use of typography. Like that was a big selling point of some of the early Macs, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Um, which is an echo of Adriano's line about industry serving humanistic values, right? So he's borrowing so much from Olivetti, way more than I even anticipated. This was not just like a drive by, a sign catches your eye and like, oh, that's interesting. Like he's deeply inspired by this stuff.
Mm.
And then 1985 rolls around and he's kicked out of Apple. And as someone from Silicon Valley, like, what do you do? Well, you go soul searching, and he naturally went soul searching in Italy. So he started visiting like these Olivetti factories, talking to designers. Like it's almost like the reverse narrative. Olivetti was talking to the manufacturers in the
Yeah.
US at their
Totally.
beginning. So Jobs, basically now in this modern narrative, he's doing the exact same thing in reverse. So exact same idea. Um, and then yeah, like that's the story
It's
continues.
it's just like there's so many, and like people who are listening, if you like look into deeper into how he was inspired, like it's so interesting because one of the things I thought was really interesting is that like the Apple retail experience is still so unique, right? But it was
Mm-hmm.
really inspired by the Olivetti retail experience, which followed the same sort of strategy, which was like these beautiful spaces, beautiful buildings, like the design aesthetic. Like it's just so interesting how he was really inspired and sort of like same approach in the
Yeah,
exact same way as the Olivetti, as Olivetti.
totally.
Um,
Now, so like I got one more point about
yeah.
Jobs as well, because this is where it kind of hit me really really hard. So in '97, Jobs returns to an almost bankrupt Apple, right?
Mhm.
Um, and his first instinct is to hire someone new for design. Really important design hire. That's Ettore Sotsas, an
Oh,
Olivetti
okay.
designer,
Yeah. He
right?
was literally one of the
Alongside,
founding designers at Olivetti. Yeah.
exactly, alongside Giorgetto Giorgiario.
Okay.
Did I get that? Okay. What?
I
Anyways,
know.
anyways,
I know. Okay. It's okay.
Italian designers. He wants to hire them all, bring them
Yeah.
in. Some of them are Olivetti, some of them aren't, but they're all Italian designers. Um, but what happens is he actually discovers Johnny Ive, who's already in house at the time, and like this is an anecdote that I found, but he just clicked more with Ive than anyone else.
Mhm.
So the intent was to hire these Italian designers because that's what he had been like living and breathing from day one, this Olivetti fixation, right?
Yeah.
But Ive clicked with him. So he hires him and he becomes like the lead designer and visionary behind Apple at that time in '97, which Ive actually isn't inspired by Italian design. He's inspired by Braun and like Dieter Rams. So
Mm.
that's where we actually have this divergence, which why I think feels like such a leap to look at Apple now and say, oh, they're inspired by Olivetti, because the two really don't match at all.
But there is something weird because post World War II, Braun, Bang& Olufsen, and IBM, they all adopted the good design is good business philosophy. So
Ah,
like were
all
they
right.
directly inspired? I'm not sure. I don't know if there's I haven't really looked into that, but they were like they are quoted as some of the first companies to take the good design is good business practice right after World War II. So like they most likely
Yeah.
were inspired as well. It sounds like what was going on in Italy, in Ivrea, and with Olivetti was like they were a big player globally because they were outpacing Fiat, like financially and from a performance perspective, they were absolutely killing it. So like it's quite possible that they were being that as well. But anyways, it's all
Yeah.
super interesting.
No, it is. But the only reason Apple products don't look like Olivetti products is because, yeah, they were just inspired from a completely different aesthetic preference,
I
right?
mean, some
More
of
the,
them do because when we did this first conversation, without even knowing any of this background, I remember looking. We had this conversation. I looked at the typewriter. I was like, that looks so much like an Apple desktop, like one of the models, whatever it
yeah.
was.
I think
I
the
think there
early
was a lot
ones,
more combination. There was a lot more of a direct tie at one point, but obviously
yeah.
that's changed a lot.
The
Um,
colored Macs, remember those? Like
yeah,
all the different
yeah,
colors? I almost feel
that
like
era, yeah,
that's more of the Olivetti thing because Italian design, love it, but it is loud. It's loud and colorful. It is not the Braun, Bang& and
yeah,
Olufsen, like
yeah,
stark,
totally. I
you
didn't know
know.
Bang& and Olufsen have been around since World War II, by the way.
Well,
Also
yeah.
fascinating. All right, let's end on another really interesting part that I'm just going to kind of leave open ended because we could go in very deep on this. But he died in 1960 on a train in Switzerland. He was 58. The official cause of his death was a stroke or heart attack. Um, then things got really weird. During his funeral, his office was ransacked. a prototype of the Programma 101 was stolen. His lead engineer died in a car crash the very next year, and CIA documents were declassified decades later, confirming that he had been under surveillance for a decade, both as a direct
Wow.
competitor to IBM in the emerging computer market and as a political threat during the Cold War, because he was way more socialist leaning, very much more of a community movement guy than his and he was doing business in Russia and China. So he was being very closely monitored.
So are you telling me you just changed this to a conspiracy podcast?
I mean, his nephew produced a documentary later, and they interviewed his personal guard, who says, "I know he was murdered." Um,
Wow. Yeah. All right.
and there's a book called "The Mysterious Affair of Olivetti," which covers his death in a lot more depth, and it's interesting to
It is
listen
a
to. I don't know
it
enough
is
to
a
say like
story like
what I
as old as
believe, but
time.
yeah, it is.
Death on a train? Come on, like you can't write that.
Politically leaning, politically involved. I mean, he was way more socialist. He was way more aligned. It seems like his company was way more aligned in business with Russia and China. So, like, I don't know, but
Yeah.
his
Meanwhile, he's
legacy,
sending computers to space with the
yeah,
US. Like, of course,
yeah.
there's I could
Meanwhile,
see
his
it. I
legacy
mean,
basically disappeared. Like, no one talks about it. No one, I mean, no one knows. We sort of
well, so
stumbled
now
onto it. Someone
we're on a
commented on,
list.
yeah, exactly. Someone commented on our on that YouTube video. Oh, it's here. Someone commented on that YouTube video, unpacking it a lot more, which got us to look into it more, which is why we're talking about it. And
Yeah.
hopefully, people that are listening find it interesting and look into it more, because I really do feel like that was like another sort of like Renaissance period for Italy, as in how it affected what we all experience today, like from a
Hmm.
corporate culture perspective, organizational design, product design. Like it's an incredible story.
Yeah. Like like just to tie this up in a bow minus the conspiracy, but like they were they were on their heels with the industrial revolution and they were behind and like looking back, they succeeded so completely with this initiative. Like they exported not just what Italian design is aesthetics wise, but they also exported this idea of a design led business, which
Hmm.
is so incredible to think about because they didn't imagine what they were building at the time would be so deeply seated globally. This isn't just what's happening in Silicon Valley. It's happening in, the Silicon Valley of the North, Waterloo, Canada. It's happening in other countries. It's that cultural export from Italy succeeded so
Hmm.
deeply. And I do think Ivrea was in a valley. So it was the OG
Yeah,
Silicon Valley.
it's hilarious.
And I don't think there's any other contenders.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's call it there. If this is interesting, let us know. Subscribe. And we're gonna probably start doing a few more of these types of deeper story-driven discussions, I think, because they're fun to do. But yeah, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Take it
Okay.
easy.
Bye.